Defending Israel with David Harris on JBS is made possible in part by a generous gift in memory of Eric and Mira J. Spector, the Paul and Lynn Late Family Foundation, To Life, to Love, Barbara and Bob Goodkind, the Patricia Worthen Ullman Foundation,
Hello JBS viewers, I'm David Harris and welcome to Defending Israel. Back by popular demand for the third time is Dalia Ziada. And because so many of you have asked to bring her back, I don't think she needs a long introduction. Suffice it to say that she is a peace activist, a human rights defender, and a very brave and principled person, as I have had the pleasure of knowing since I first met her many years ago. Dalia, welcome back.
Thank you so much, David. Always a pleasure to be with you.
Thank you. Dalia, lots to talk about. As we record here in New York, President Trump landed some hours ago in Saudi Arabia. It's the first of 3 stops. And I wonder, what are your thoughts about the trip in general? What do you anticipate will happen? And any perhaps impressions of the first hours in Saudi Arabia?
It's very interesting. This is the first time we see an American president who is visiting the region and is not treating the region as a one whole, which is an important distinction from other policies or other foreign policies of previous U.S. administrations in the region, looking at the region as a one whole, maybe dividing it into Israel on one side, Iran on the other side, and Arabs on the third side. But it's this time we are seeing that President Trump is specifically targeting Gulf countries. He's going there to speak with them, to make deals with them in what I may call like a policy of compartmentalization, making compartments of the region, which I think is a very healthy policy because the region is not a one whole. The Arab Gulf states has a specific nature, has specific sources of power, specific ambitions that are different from other countries like in North Africa, for example, like Egypt and Jordan, who are immediate neighbors of Israel. So this is a good step in the right direction, I believe, that will maybe create a new reality to the region. Also, the direct relationship with Saudi Arabia, which I recently in an article called some kind of a Trump MBS mandate for the Middle East. It's kind of a new agenda that President Trump and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman are writing for the region. It's not a secret, Saudi Arabia right now is a big sister in the region. It's the one who survived the Arab Spring. It's the one who, and with the entire Gulf region, of course, because of their monarchy nature and tribal nature, they are the ones who still have the most economic power in the region. They are the ones who also can influence economic markets because of their control of the oil market. So this is something that President Trump understands very well. And also, that's why, he's making these very close connections with Saudi Arabia as the big sister of Arabs right now. Also, it's very interesting that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is not the overwhelming issue that is overarching every other issue in these conversations with Gulf countries. And thank God for that, because finally, there is a focus on things that are more important for the region and more important even for these states. So this is also a progress in itself. I am not sure what's the big surprise that President Trump mentioned, that it will make everyone happy. I hope it was release of Idan Alexander, yesterday's last American hostage alive who was under Hamas capture. Yeah, let's see if maybe there are other surprises, and we are just in the first hours of the visit, so let's see what's going to happen.
Dalia, I can't help but think back some 3 years to when President Biden in 2022 made his visit to Riyadh. It was a very different kind of visit. There was a lot of tension and even animosity between Washington and Riyadh. A lot of focus by the United States on human rights questions in Saudi Arabia. Contrast for us the Biden approach and the Trump approach, and which do you think makes more sense for America?
Oh, this is a good point, David, actually, that you pointed to. The thing is that President Biden's visit to Saudi Arabia last time came too late and came after very hostile statements he made a few months before that to please maybe some anti-Saudi or the Saudi axis in the region, people who are more on the side of groups like the Muslim Brotherhood and Islamists in general here in the US. He wanted to please them. And so he made very hostile statements against Saudi Arabia. He said things like, we want to make Saudi Arabia a pariah state, which is impossible. But it was very shocking to the Saudis, of course. Even the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman at that time, he refused to shake hands with President Biden, which was a clear message that the Saudis are not happy with him and with his foreign policy in the region. Also, if you remember when President Biden came in power, in his first week, he removed the Houthi from the terrorist list. And the Houthi is a direct threat to Saudi Arabia and other Gulf countries, Sunni Muslim countries. So these all accumulated into a sense of that, the US is not our best ally anymore. I mean, I'm speaking from the Saudi perspective. Now, when the President Trump came, he of course, he does not pressure them on human rights issues and democratization, which I think is not a good thing in itself. But if we look at the bigger picture, actually, the best thing about President Trump is that he knows how to speak the language of the Middle East, which for these wealthy Arab Gulf countries is the language of money. How we can utilize our economic power to achieve more success and more progress and even make more wealth. And this is something President Trump understands very well because of his background as a businessman, someone who's looking for opportunities and even creating them. That's why he's having a common ground to speak with Arab Gulf countries. The interesting thing this time is that he's not making a distinction between Arab Gulf countries and their policies in terms of regional policies. Like, for example, he's meeting with Qatar, which is very much on the side of Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood and the Islamists, while at the same time meeting with the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, who took an opposing position to that. Including UAE, which is also on the side of Israel, obviously. So it's interesting that he's not making the distinction that he made in his first visit during his first term.
And let me just add for the record that President Biden, when he first came, still had the image of the Khashoggi murder in Istanbul, which he associated with Saudi Arabia and specifically the Crown Prince, as part of his attention. And I suspect from the Crown Prince's side, he associated Joe Biden as vice president to Barack Obama when the Iran deal was signed in 2015, which the Saudis saw as a big threat. So the message being from you, and I'm only reinforcing it, there was no love lost. Another question about the trip, because you mentioned Qatar. We all read in recent days that Qatar is giving a gift, however that's defined, free of charge, said the president, of a palace in the sky, a new Air Force One. Is that really a generous, unselfish gift? Or, like many things in life, especially in politics, does it come with strings attached in your estimation?
It's not a generous gift. Oh, nothing is generous that comes from Qatar just for the love of the United States or the love of President Trump. No, of course. It's meant somehow to, Qatar, actually, part of Qatar's policies, they are very good in winning favor with people and with other heads of states, with other countries, and so using their economic power. By even suggesting things like, generous direct investments in the economy of certain countries or giving gifts to certain leaders. And so the gift in itself is not illegal, is not something, actually, I'm seeing a lot of criticism in the American media right now, like, how come President Trump accepts it? But actually, in itself, there is nothing wrong with it. But if you look who's giving it, this is the problem. Like, for example, if the same gift was given by Saudi Arabia or the United Arab Emirates, I'm sure the reaction will not be that drastic or that outrageous among the American people or American observers who are commenting on this. But the reason why there are many angry people, because it's coming from Qatar, which has been manipulating the United States for so long. On one side, they are showing the friendly face of, we are willing to host your military base in the region. We are willing to make investments in the United States. We are calming down terrorist organizations. That's what they claim in the region, like Taliban, Al-Qaeda, including even political Islamists like the Muslim Brotherhood. And so this is what they claim they are doing. But from the other side, we will find them funding protests that are happening here all over, that have been happening all over the United States for over a year now, that did not only target Israel, that are not only anti-Semitic, but also anti-American and anti-Western. So, and plus funding universities in order to produce research that serves Qatar's interests, that in many ways is against the United States interest. Qatar also is part of the axis of evil that includes countries like Iran and Turkey that don't want good for the United States and are working against the interests of the United States. So keeping all this in mind, it's very hard to expect that Qatar is only making a generous gesture or a friendly gesture by giving such a plane. Maybe they are paving the way for asking for something bigger in the future, or wanting to appear equal or as equally important to Saudi Arabia, for example, which is taking the spotlight right now in terms of U.S. foreign policy in the region.
Dalia, you spoke about the Muslim Brotherhood. You mentioned it more than once. You and I are going to be together in the coming days at a conference to be held in Washington, D.C. on the Muslim Brotherhood in an effort to try and educate the American people and elected officials in Washington about the danger posed by the Muslim Brotherhood, which many people still do not seem to understand. Talk to our JBS viewing audience about the Muslim Brotherhood, which after all was born in your native country, Egypt, and why it poses such a danger, and what is the connection of countries like Qatar, or for that matter, Turkey, to the Muslim Brotherhood?
Thank you, David. Yes, actually, I'm very excited about this event. We are going to brief more than 100 congressional staffers and also other policymakers on the danger that radical Islamism poses to the national security of the United States. And in the heart of this, the role of the Muslim Brotherhood in fueling this radicalization or radical Islamism or radicalization process of the US, of the United States, and how they are weaponizing the democracy of the United States to destroy the United States from within in what they call the subversion strategy or the subversion goal of destroying the West from within and the United States from within. The shocking thing about it is that although the Muslim Brotherhood is criticized worldwide, people are talking about it everywhere, here in the United States and in Western communities in general, people approach the Muslim Brotherhood issue with a lot of caution. And they are sometimes they attach it to concepts like Islamophobia. They fear that if they spoke about the Muslim Brotherhood, this is going to be make them appear Islamophobic. So they avoid talking about it as a whole, which is actually means that the Muslim Brotherhood is somehow succeeding in using this Islamophobia thing as a shield, as they have always planned to since they invented it in the 1990s to cover on their work. So the Muslim Brotherhood is not anymore an issue of the Middle East. It's not anymore an issue of Egypt, where they started, or Arab countries, or Muslim majority countries. Actually, they are now the issue of the United States, of European countries, and of the West in general. What we have seen in the past year is part actually of the agenda of the long-term project, the 100-year project of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's something that I call the Palestinization of the American politics. And many people may think, the Palestinian cause, yes, is a great thing. Oh, who would refuse, for a certain people, regardless of what they are called, to have their own state, to have their own future, Anyone agrees with that, but this is not the Palestinian cause. This is not what they adopt. It's not about building a Palestinian state. It's about destroying Israel and destroying the Israeli state and destroying the West from behind it. And we have seen in the doctrine of the Muslim Brotherhood, in the box of the main ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood, and I made an entire research on it, and hopefully we will be able to present parts of it in the conference we're having in the coming days. All the ideologues of the Muslim Brotherhood, starting from from Sayyid Qutb, in the 1960s, up to Al-Qaradawi, who died recently, and his even younger students like Ali Al-Salabi, who is now leading the Council for Muslim Scholars in Qatar, which was a position that Al-Qaradawi took before his death. All of them advocate for using the Palestinian cause as a central issue around which they can recruit Muslim minorities in Western countries and also rally support for their Muslim Brotherhood agenda in Western countries. They say this very plainly. And over the past years, yes, while people were busy with watching the protests and criticizing them, there was more dangerous work happening in the background. One of this very dangerous work that's actually meant to further progress the 100-year project of the Muslim Brotherhood, using this Palestinization process of the American politics, was a program that started in the network of American Muslim schools, and it's now expanding to other schools in America and is available online as well. It's a program called Education on Palestine. It's a very, very well-produced program, a training program, educational program, and it's full of all the types of lies you can imagine about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And they say very clearly in the mandate or the description of the mission is that they want to promote the Palestinian cause, not as a nationalistic cause, but as a religious cause that all Muslims should be, like all Muslims in the United States, should be rallying around. And this is clearly what the Muslim Brotherhood, designed or drafted in their 100-year plan 40 years ago.
Dalia, in the West, I can think of two different reactions. One was the reaction of President Obama, when he traveled first to Egypt in, I think, his first year, 2009, where he insisted over the objections of President Mubarak that the Muslim Brotherhood representatives be allowed to attend his lecture, his speech. Correct me if I'm wrong. and indeed were placed in the front rows or near the front rows of the hall where President Obama gave his first public speech in the Arab world as President of the United States, on the one hand. And of course, later, Mubarak was forced out of office and he was replaced by Morsi, a member of the Muslim Brotherhood. On the other hand, Austria, to the best of my knowledge, is the only Western country that has tried to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. If that's the spectrum from trying to engage and co-opt the Muslim Brotherhood to trying to ban the Muslim Brotherhood in the West, where does Dalia Ziada sit on that spectrum?
Oh, I'm very much on the side of banning the Muslim Brotherhood, actually, although I know that legally or for legal reasons or for certain laws that the United States adopt, it sounds very challenging right now. And also for the nature of the Muslim Brotherhood organization and how it is operating in the United States, it's very hard to put it into one entity that you can, designate it. But actually, this is one of the things we are pushing for right now, because I believe somehow they have to be banned. Yes, there are certain steps that we can take towards achieving this as we get to this point. But actually, the argument has always been that we cannot designate the Muslim Brotherhood because it's not a one entity. We cannot link all these organizations under one thing and say this is called the Muslim Brotherhood, which unfortunately was very clever of the organizations ideologically affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood, ideologically and financially and politically affiliated to the Muslim Brotherhood right now. But also, it has very much right now the argument had very much to do with the claim that even if the Muslim Brotherhood is one entity, they are not violent. They are not practicing violence that threatens the United States. Maybe this argument was correct before October 7. However, after October 7, we saw very clearly the Muslim Brotherhood and their civil society organizations and the student organizations, and so showing us their real face. They are practicing violence. They are using a language very hostile to the United States. They are vandalizing public properties. They are bringing down the American flag and replacing it with the Palestinian flag on main buildings in Washington, D.C., including the Union Station. It's very scary. What they are doing now is targeting the United States very clearly, like no question they are doing that. So I think this can be a new door through which, or a new window through which, we should look on the Muslim Brotherhood in a different light, because really they are now not the problem of Egypt anymore, or the United Arab Emirates, or what. Ironically, I mean, all of these countries are already banning the Muslim Brotherhood.
I wanted to say that, Dalia, that's really important. I think Jordan became the most recent country to ban the Muslim Brotherhood, as Egypt did, as Saudi Arabia did, as the UAE did. Obviously, Qatar did not. Turkey has not. But I think that's really important to stress. And I also want viewers to know that the conference that Dalia and I are attending is hosted by ISGAP, the Institute for the Study of Global Anti-Semitism and Policy, with which you and I are both affiliated. So I want to give ISGAP the credit it deserves. And we have just a few minutes left, Dalia, and I want to move on to one other subject, because you, Dalia Ziada, have been the target of a campaign in your native Egypt to disenfranchise you, to cut your Egyptian citizenship. Why?
Unfortunately, it's escalating very quickly, David. If you remember, over a year ago, when I first had to run for my life out of Egypt, we had an interview. And at that time, you were assuring me, it's a temporary thing. Sooner or later, Egypt will realize they did a mistake, that, they target someone like me because I support Israel's right to defend itself. And I condemn a terrorist organization like Hamas that is clearly a terrorist organization, no question about this. But unfortunately, it did not stop 16 months after this, and they're still targeting me. They're still trying to silence me. They are very disturbed that I still have a voice, and now I even have an international platform to speak. The most recent episode of the campaign last month in April, actually, it was very, very sad and very bad that they escalated it to the level of requesting to revoke my Egyptian citizenship, to relinquish my Egyptian citizenship, relinquish me of my citizenship. And why is that? Simply because I'm telling the truth. I'm speaking up against Hamas, against a terrorist organization that they still want to please in order, because of the influence of Qatar on Egypt, unfortunately. So I'm now facing, unfortunately, like more serious charges, and the things that my case is now moved has been referred by the Egyptian Attorney General to the Supreme State Security Prosecution, which is the most powerful body in the country. I don't know any of my friends who are pro-democracy and human rights activists who's gone through this prosecution. They never survived it, so I don't think I will survive it either. And at any moment now, I'm expecting the case will be. I may get a decision as bad as maybe death sentence or removing my citizenship.
What a loss for Egypt if that were to happen, but what a gain for America that you have found refuge here. We really have just seconds left, but if you can quickly react, but some would say, wait a second, doesn't Egypt have a peace treaty with Egypt since 1979? Why would they take such harsh measures against someone who's simply speaking up about Israel's right to defend itself? And isn't Hamas an extension of the Muslim Brotherhood, which Egypt itself bans? What do you say, briefly?
Very quickly, why Egypt turned against Israel overnight like this has to do with the growing influence of Turkey and Qatar on Egypt. Qatar is literally bribing the Egyptian regime by so-called direct investments at a time when Egypt is having a terrible economic crisis and Turkey is offering political coverage for Egypt. So their influence is growing really badly in Egypt. And I saw this coming. Actually, I saw this change coming somehow. And here we are. The second part, why they are approving Hamas while banning the Muslim Brotherhood, because the Muslim Brotherhood operate inside Egypt and they act as a threat to the throne of President el-Sisi and to the throne of the military, which is the de facto leader of the country right now. So of course they would ban them because they are a threat to them. But Hamas is a threat to Israel primarily, and Hamas is killing the Jews, which is something very highly approved by the Egyptians or the majority of Egyptian mainstream, unfortunately, and thus it's also approved by the military and the Egyptian leadership.
Wow. I wish we had more time to unpack that, but what a powerful and important statement. And I would only add, you know this, Dalia, but those in Washington watching, Qatar and Turkey are still treated as close allies of the United States. Where do we begin this discussion? President Trump included Qatar on his visit to 3 Gulf countries and is approaching it as an ally, just as previous American administrations, Republican and Democrat, both treated Qatar. So, important message from Dalia Ziada that those 2 American allies are undermining the largest, most important and powerful country in the Arab world, Egypt. Dalia, I can only thank you not just for being here, but above all for your courage, your principle, and your determination to speak the truth. Thank you.
And thank you so much, David, for amplifying my voice and being behind me all the way. Thank you.
Always. JBS viewers, thank you for watching this important interview with Dalia Ziada. I'm David Harris. This is Defending Israel, and looking forward to seeing you again next week.